Hello, everyone, and welcome to the fourth session in the third series of American English Live Teacher Development. My name is Lauren, and I'll be with you today along with my colleague behind the scenes, moderator Heather, who will be serving as moderator to help answer your questions and respond to your comments during the session. Today, Kate will be talking with Michelle Benegas and Amy Stolpesta about developing EFL teacher leadership skills through instructional coaching techniques. So let's go ahead and get started.
Thank you, Lauren, for that introduction, and welcome everyone. As Lauren said, I'm Kate. I work here in Washington, D.C. at the Office of English Language Programs, and I am part of the American English social media team. And as always, I'm very happy to be your facilitator and host today. We'd like to extend a warm welcome to our first-time viewers, and are also, of course, very happy to see all of you who have been with us for past sessions here again with us. It's great to be with you all. Let's start by taking a look at these American English Live viewing group photos featuring teachers participating in a viewing session hosted by the Youth English Corner at the Zanzibar Central Library. We love to see teachers learning and sharing ideas as they view the American English Live series. So thank you for sending these great pictures in, and we'd love to see even more. So we hope that more and more of you will send photos to us of all of the learning and sharing that you are doing at your institutions around the world. Please feel free to share your photos by emailing americanenglishwebinars@elprograms.org or by sharing your photos on social media. If you share your photos on social media, be sure to tag us at American English for Educators so that we can see them and feature them possibly in the next session. We are halfway through our exciting lineup for this series. After today, our two remaining sessions are on the topics of strategies for teaching in large or multi-level classrooms. We look forward to learning with you through the next three sessions. So here's a little bit about what to expect. Each session is approximately 60 minutes long and is related to a Teacher's Corner theme on the American English website. The presenter will present the material, and I, as your host, will ask questions and make comments as well. But we really hope to hear from you. We would love to hear your questions, comments, and ideas. So please feel free to share those in the comments or in the chat box. When our session comes to a close, you'll be able to receive, or you'll have a chance to receive, a digital badge as an indicator of your participation in this event. So we are going to share a link in the comments and at the top of this post. Click on that link, which will take you to a short quiz about today's session. You must answer 2 out of 3 multiple choice questions correctly in order to receive your digital badge. It's not too difficult of a quiz, so don't worry. If you're able to join us for the whole session, you should have no problem. Also, we're going to leave this link open until Monday, October 22nd. So if you're only able to watch a portion of today's session and you want to review the material before you take the quiz, you have all the way until Monday at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a colleague who wants to watch the recording and take the quiz later, they're also welcome to do so. Once you have successfully passed the quiz, you should expect to get your badge by email from americanenglish@state.gov within about a week. So I mentioned the Teacher's Corner resources on the American English website a bit earlier, and this month's Teacher's Corner focuses on professional development for teacher trainers. These online resources examine topics like bringing teachers together to discuss current language teacher research and issues, getting teachers involved in professional development outside of their classroom, ways to conduct teacher observations, low-cost teaching workshops, and much more. So find these great resources at the link listed here and in the comments. And of course, we really hope that you have already signed up for our free Massive Open online course, Professional Development for Teacher Trainers. This course began on Monday, but you still have time to enroll until October 22nd, so we certainly hope that you'll do so. Please join us for this free 5-week online course. We hope to see you there and are excited as we're beginning that course. And now for today's session, Developing Teacher Leadership Skills, Instructional Coaching Techniques for English as a Foreign Language Educators. This presentation will describe how a school or other institution can build capacity for serving English learners through teacher-to-teacher coaching. Participants will learn how to identify coaches to provide professional development for colleagues. You will be guided through the English Learners in the Mainstream ELM coaching process, a framework that uses pre and post coaching observations with a focus on best practices for English language learners. Participants will be provided a toolkit for resources for professional development. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our presenters for today, Dr. Michelle Benegas and Amy Stolpesta. Dr. Michelle Benegas is an assistant professor at Hamline University in St. Paul, Minnesota. Her TEDx talk, Confessions, New Teacher of Newcomers, tells of her early ESL teaching experiences with Minnesota's newcomer population. Beyond her work in ESL teacher preparation, Michelle is also the principal investigator of the ELM English Learners in the Mainstream project, a U.S. Department of Education funded initiative aiming to ensure that all teachers are prepared to meet English learners' needs through teacher leadership. Amy Stolpesta is the director of the ELM project at Hamline University. She is a licensed K-12 ESL teacher and an experienced teacher educator. Amy began her career in 1994 with Teach for America, teaching Spanish and English in Louisiana. After earning her Master of Education degree at the University of Minnesota, she taught elementary school in ESL in Minneapolis and St. Paul. Most recently, Amy served as a program director and executive director for an educational nonprofit organization. Excuse me. So, welcome, Michelle and Amy. We're so happy to have you here today.
Thank you. We're glad to be here today. So thank you, Kate, for the warm welcome, and thank you to everyone that's joining us today in this American English Live presentation called Developing Teacher Leadership Skills, Instructional Coaching Techniques for EFL Educators. I am Michelle Benegas.
And I am Amy Stolpesta.
All right, so let's get started. So the ELM project is also known as the English Learners in the Mainstream project, was created to help English language teachers share their expertise with content area teachers through instructional coaching and teacher leadership. In the context of our talk today, we will be talking about EFL teachers working with other EFL teachers. So in the EFL setting, the ELM coaching model can help English teachers share knowledge and expertise with each other, build professional collaborative relationships between teachers, and most importantly, improve instruction for students. All right, so the ELM project was funded and continues to be funded by a generous grant from the U.S. Department of Education, Office of English Language Acquisition.
So let's jump right into the ELM project model for coaching. The ELM project focuses on the work of language teachers who spend part of their day teaching and then a portion of their day helping other teachers by serving as a coach or a mentor so that they can learn more and improve their instruction for students. The ELM model is really relationship based, so it's important that we start out by explaining that in the ELM project model for coaching, it's two teachers who are equal to one another. One isn't the boss or the person in charge of the other. They're actually people who are working together as equals and have a strong professional relationship where they share knowledge with each other and are equals, and their coaching work is really based in conversation. So it's about the two people working together and talking through ways of teaching to improve student learning.
Wonderful. So The English Learners in the Mainstream project that you all have developed in the St. Paul, Minneapolis area in Minnesota is focused where there are some coaches that work as teachers half the time and then coach the other half of the time, right? But today, for today's session, we're going to be talking about how we can use this amazing tool that Amy and Michelle have developed in our own EFL context. So yeah, and as you mentioned, Amy, one of the main focuses that we can really be focusing on as we learn and share today is that relationship between the teachers, where it's two teachers who are really involved in collaboration and sharing knowledge and focusing on improving their own practice. So I'm excited. Let's get started.
Great, thank you.
All right, so the first step, of course, is to identify who the professional development coaches will be. If you chose to attend this webinar today, we think you probably think of yourself as a leader and maybe are considering being a coach yourself. That's great. Our first recommendation is always to start with volunteers. We want people to serve as coaches that want to be coaches, so we don't want anyone forced into doing this. Secondly, we want coaches who are experienced working with adults or good at working with adults. If one of your colleagues is an excellent teacher with, say, young children, that might not mean that they would be the best coach. It depends. Lastly, we want coaches that know their subject area well. And in this case, the subject area will be English language as well as language education.
Wonderful. I love how with this model that you want to ask people to volunteer to be part of this program. So we had a question earlier in our morning session about the two roles of the coach and the teacher. So just to make sure that we're clear, we have two teachers who are working together, one who is serving as a coach and the other who is serving as the one being coach or receiving the coaching. That might change or they might switch roles sometimes, but the important thing is that one person wants to be coached and one person wants to be a coach. So I really like that it's starting with volunteers, because I think one thing that often doesn't lead to effectiveness is when teachers feel like they have to do something or they're being forced. But as you guys are continuing on with this discussion, I would love to hear from our audience what role you would like to play. Would you like to receive some coaching from maybe a more experienced teacher? Or would you like to be a coach and help a colleague identify some practices that they might be able to improve? So we would love to hear from you. And then you guys can go ahead and I'll share some responses.
Great. So when we think about who should be coached, just like Michelle said about the people who are doing the coaching, you want to start with volunteers. And I think that's probably a really important theme throughout this whole model, is that people who get involved with coaching, when it's teacher to teacher coaching, really need to decide that it's something they want to take part in, because it isn't an evaluation of teaching. We're not deciding who's a good teacher and who isn't a good teacher. It's more about learning together. And so it's something that you would volunteer to take part in, as opposed to being forced to take part in. And so when you're looking, if you're going to be a coach, when you're looking for colleagues or people you work with, other EFL teachers maybe, who you want to coach, you would look for people who maybe you already have a good professional relationship. You may already be doing a lot of things that are like coaching or mentoring, but in a more informal sort of way. And so looking for the people who you already have a really strong relationship with is a great starting point, beyond finding people who would volunteer to participate in this. It also is really helpful, because teachers are very busy, as you all know, to choose teachers that might have some common planning time in your schedule, where there's time during the day when you can get together and sit down and have conversations about instruction. As I said about the ELM coaching model, this is a conversation-based relationship. And so having that time to sit down and discuss is really an important part of the model.
Great. Yeah, I'm definitely seeing the theme of the relationship and conversation piece being a really important part of the process that you're going to share with us today. And I just wanted to tell you, a few people have responded about what they would like to be. Nadina says she would like to be the coach. Aisha says, after so many years of teaching, I would like to be a coach for newcomers, but for newcoming teachers. But she always wants to learn from anyone else as well. Nahid believes that he can be a good coach because he has good leadership skills. And Rahila says that receiving coaching would be awesome and would help her experience. So thank you so much for your great responses, everybody.
Thank you. The great thing about the ELM coaching cycle, as this slide shows, is that it's cyclical. So you really can be both a coach and then maybe switch roles. So for those of you who are interested in being coached, you can go back and forth in those roles, which is really nice. And Michelle will talk about that in a little while. But let's just go over the ELM coaching cycle quickly, and then we'll break down each of the pieces so that there's more detail provided to you about each step of the cycle. The first part of the ELM coaching cycle is to set an instructional goal. And the reason that you set a goal is because that helps the coach to decide what to look for in the remaining part of the coaching cycle. Having that goal helps to make sure that there is focus in the observations and in the resources and strategies that are shared with the teacher. Once a goal is identified, the ELM coach or the coach would conduct an observation. This is kind of the baseline information that you get about the teaching, thinking about that specific goal. After that, it's really important to have a post-observation discussion. The post-observation discussion is why it's helpful to have some common time to get together. And then there's a longer stage where sharing instructional strategies takes place and other resources related to the goal. After that period of time passes, then a post-observation would take place, as well as another discussion, thinking about how the goal has been met or needs to continue to be working on. And that conversation is likely to result in another set of shared instructional strategies or resources. But let's take some time now to break down each of these stages in the ELM coaching cycle so that you have more detailed information about what the stage looks like.
Sounds good. Also, I think one thing that I'm noticing about this cycle is that the goal is one of the most important things. And then there's a lot of chance for observation, discussion, and sharing, which I think is really exciting. But anyways, I'm sorry to interrupt. You can go ahead and continue here.
Not at all. So just so that you know what you're going to be seeing as we move through the coaching cycle is that we will tell you about one of the steps in the cycle, and then we will model that step in the cycle through a role play. So that is yet to come. The first step, of course, is setting instructional goals. If you have common planning time with the teacher that you plan to coach, that's a good time to do it. If not, you can plan to meet before or after school or even online if that works well for you.
Yes, so when you're setting instructional goals, there are some key questions that the coach can ask the teacher to help get that conversation started and to kind of focus in on an area to work on and improve on in instruction. So as Michelle said, we thought we would role play what this conversation might look like. So I'm going to play the role of the coach, and Michelle will play the role of the teacher who is being coached. And you can see what it might look like if you were to do this with some of your colleagues. So Michelle, before I come in and observe your classroom teaching, I'm wondering what you think you want to work on in your instruction. What are some things that maybe you see your students struggling with as they're learning to speak, read, write, and listen in English? Are there things that you notice about what they do that you might want to work on?
Well, I've been thinking a lot about the 4 modalities, like you just said, the reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And my students are very good at reading and writing, but I don't hear them speaking enough. And so one area that I want to work on is how can I create spaces or design lessons where students are speaking English more often.
So you're really seeing a lot of great information or coming from the students when it's in writing, and their use of language is really strong in writing maybe, and they read well, but you're not hearing them speak it. And we know that they need to speak it to really gain fluency. So maybe the goal for your coaching could be to increase oral interaction in class with students. How does that sound?
That sounds perfect.
Great, good. Well, let's go with that as your goal for this coaching cycle.
Okay.
This is great. Thanks for sharing that really good role play, because I think it really brings to light the type of conversation that you might have if you're working with a colleague and one of you is being the coach, as Amy was, and one of you is being the one receiving the coaching, like Michelle was. And you can see how they talked together and had a collaborative approach about choosing one goal that Michelle is then gonna work on in her classroom. And that goal is to increase oral interaction in class, or maybe to increase student talk time in English. And we'd love to see if you think that would be a good goal for your classroom. Do you think that's a goal that you would like to do in your classroom, is increase student talk time? And also would love to hear other ideas of goals that you might set if you were in this type of collaborative coaching situation. So yeah, please continue, and we'll look for your comments and ideas, everyone, about other types of instructional goals that might be useful in your context.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to the next step. This step is conducting an observation. And so when the coach is observing the teacher, they should be paying special attention to that instructional goal. The coach might see other things that they think are interesting, and they can write that down. But what we really want the coach to be focusing on is that goal that the teacher has identified.
Great. So thinking about the goal that Michelle set to increase oral language use in English in the target language, I would go in as the coach and conduct an observation looking for some of the following things. I would be looking for whether or not students have opportunities to interact as a whole group. And many classrooms do have those opportunities where the teacher asks a question to the whole class, and the whole class has an opportunity to answer those questions using the target language. And the other things I might look for, though, are things like small group interaction. Are the students placed in groups and given tasks and activities that provide them a chance to use the target language? Are the students staying in the target language, or do they maybe go back to home language sometimes? And then I would also look for opportunities for individual interaction. And usually that happens in pairs. So are the students given a partner and having chances to talk and use the English language that they're learning in that lesson?
Great. So as the coach in this situation, you're kind of preparing yourself for that first observation by thinking, what are some things that I can be looking for? And maybe making a mental note of those things, or maybe writing it down, something that you're going to be kind of looking for. The US Embassy in Cuba had a comment. Hello to you. I hope you're in a viewing group, and we'd love to see your photos. They said, goals are the fundamental principle in every plan, keeping us focused on what we want to achieve. So I think that's a great comment, just helping us to reiterate the importance of those instructional goals. And also we had a quick question from Noreen Mirza. She's asking, is coaching the same as mentoring?
They are very similar. And, in some school settings, the word mentor is used, and in other school settings, the word coach is used. And they really are very similar, if not the same, depending on where you are teaching. So mentoring and coaching in the ELM coaching cycle can be used in almost the exact same way.
Great. And one other question, I think that you have mentioned this before, but what if the teacher who's being observed feels sort of nervous about this process? What kinds of ideas or strategies can you help us with in that way?
Well, my response to that comment, and that's a comment that we get a lot, would be that the coach maybe think about themselves as someone who will also be coached, and the teacher think about themselves as someone who will be a coach. So I think if we can remove the idea of hierarchy, that someone is over someone else, that makes everyone feel more comfortable, right? So if I'm the teacher this time around and Amy is the coach, but I know that next month it's going to be different, then maybe that will make us feel like we're on more of an equal playing field.
That's a great idea. And yeah, I think that if both teachers know that the other one is going to be helping or observing later, they can kind of look at it as more collaborative. And one other question, do you ever use these types of observations for like teacher evaluation or something like this?
Well, in this case, we don't use this for teacher evaluation. That's not the goal of the ELM coaching cycle. This is for teachers to work with other teachers. Now, that's not to say that you couldn't use the coaching cycle for evaluation, but that really isn't the purpose of the way that we envision that model working. This is a way to really empower teachers to take charge of their learning and to share their expertise with each other. And hopefully that reduces any nervousness or anxiety that a teacher might feel about it, because no one's going to get a grade for this ELM coaching cycle process. And also no teacher, at least that I've ever met or in my own experience, feels like they're perfect. And there's always something that you kind of wish you could work on in your teaching.
Wonderful. Yes. Christian says that this is professional development. So it's just a way for teachers to opt in and to volunteer for a really in-depth form of professional development. Thank you for that comment. All right. Thanks for answering my questions.
Yes, absolutely. So moving on to the next step in the cycle is the post-observation discussion. This one is really important. The coach needs to ask the teacher how they feel that lesson went. At this point, they haven't had any discussions about changes that they're going to make to their instruction. The coach has just seen a typical lesson in that teacher's classroom. So at this point, they meet, and we ask that they meet very shortly after the observation so that the feeling and the experience is still fresh.
So let's look at how this works in our role play, where I'm the coach and Michelle is the teacher. So in our post-observation discussion, again, it's helpful to ask a lot of questions. So let me start, Michelle, by tell me what you think went really well in your lesson that I observed.
I think that the students enjoyed the lesson, and I was really happy that I covered all of the content that I planned to cover.
Great. Yeah. Are there things that you would like to improve related to your goal around increasing oral language?
Yeah, there are a couple of students in the class who speak English more, but most of them don't speak in class. And I really want to work on that. Great.
So, I'm thinking about some of the things that I do when I'm teaching. And one of the things that I try to do is make sure that every time I ask the group a question, they turn to their neighbor, and I give them about a minute, and they turn to their neighbor and they answer the question. And then we come back to the whole group and they raise their hand and answer the question. And that way everyone has a chance to speak in English. That's one way to get every student in the room using the target language.
That's a great idea. My class is very big. And so I struggled to think of ways that they could speak with each other, but turning and talking to one partner, I think would work.
Yeah. And I'll keep thinking about some new ways that you could use your lessons and just change the activities up a little bit so that students are talking some more.
Thank you.
That's great. And I love how you started by asking, Amy, by asking Michelle what she liked about what went well first. And then also to sort of think critically about what else could have maybe been improved. So you're starting with her own observations rather than saying, I observed this, I observed that right away. And I think that's a great approach. And Shaima says that she believes that sharing the best moments they had is a great topic to start with. So she agrees as well. And then it looks like you kind of kept going with the conversation in a way that kind of led to an idea that you had. And it was probably a lot less threatening for Michelle to get that last idea after she'd already been able to share what went well.
Yes, exactly. Yes. All right. So moving forward to the next step, this step is share instructional strategies. So Amy, the coach in this case, has had some time to think about what I want to work on, and she's gathered some resources. These resources might be books, websites, maybe a strategy that she uses in her own classroom, those sorts of things, and she shares them with me.
Great. So why don't we role play this and show you some of the approaches on the next slide for sharing out instructional strategies. So as Michelle mentioned, this is something that would take place after the post-observation conversation. And it may not happen in one sitting. It might be something that you do over time. And you can share these instructional strategies in a variety of ways. It can be email. You decide how it works best for your setting. But Michelle, let's take on our roles and talk about some of the instructional strategies that you might share. So Michelle, I've been thinking about your goal around oral language use in the classroom and increasing that for your students. And so I did some research and I found this really fantastic book by Jeff Swears called Academic Conversations. And it is full of all sorts of ideas and activities and theories around getting your students to talk more in class using the target language and the vocabulary that you're teaching them. So I have this book, so I'm going to give this to you to read on your own time so that you can decide what might work in your teaching. I'm also going to share some website links to Kate Kinsella's work. She's amazing because she's a professor sometimes for part of her job, and she also teaches 13 and 14-year-olds in a school in San Francisco.
Wow.
And so she actually does all of the things that she studies. So she has some great resources on academic vocabulary and getting students to talk in pairs, especially.
Wow. Thank you. Well, I will look over the resources that you share with me, and then maybe when you come back to observe next time, you'll see how I'm using some of those strategies.
That's great.
Very cool. So in this discussion, you are sharing some of the ideas and resources that you have found that are really useful for your teaching and sharing those with her. And I think probably a lot of our experienced teachers out there have books that they always go to, or a website where they always go to find really great ideas that maybe a teacher with less experience in that particular strategy or that particular skill doesn't know about. So that's a really helpful tool to sort of, in just a conversation, broaden your knowledge of all the resources that are out there that can be helpful.
Exactly.
So for the next step, step 5, this is conducting a post-coaching observation. And we assume that there's some time between the discussion, the sharing of strategies, and now the post-coaching observation, because the teacher needs some time to learn about these new approaches and to try them out in their classroom. So the post-coaching observation occurs, of course, after the coaching conversations and the resource sharing.
So in a post-coaching observation, it's very similar to your first observation. When you're going in for the second observation, you're really kind of looking for the same things, because the observation and the whole coaching cycle is driven by the goal. And in this case, it's the goal that Michelle identified, which is to increase student oral language production in the target language. So I would go back in to observe, and I would again be looking for whole group interaction opportunities. Whether or not Michelle maybe has developed some small group opportunities for students to speak using the target language. And then also some of those individual interactions. Michelle mentioned she had a larger class, so sometimes it's really hard to call on all of the students. And so having them turn to a neighbor or work in pairs ensures that everyone gets a chance to speak in the target language.
All right, so moving on to the next step, which is the post-observation discussion. This is a time to discuss and celebrate the changes that occurred between the pre and the post-observations. These observations tend to be, I call them feel-good discussions, because usually the teacher gets to highlight on all of the growth that they've made. Of course, sometimes the coach can mention some things that they could work on, right? It's not only good things, but really there's usually a lot of growth discussed at this time.
Great. I love that word, celebrate.
Mm-hmm.
And we have Noreen, who made a comment earlier, said that this is a really positive way of sharing in coaching. The one coach would not feel bad, but rather motivated. So very good. Thanks for that comment.
I'm happy to hear that. Great. So let's think about that post-observation discussion and what that might look like in the example that we're providing around increasing oral language use in Michelle's classroom. So again, it's very question-based. Starting with questions is a really great way to make sure that everybody feels comfortable, and that the person who's being coached, that teacher, is kind of driving the conversation. So let's do our role play so you can see what that might look like.
Sounds good.
So Michelle, do you feel like you met your instructional goal around getting students to speak more in English?
Mostly, yeah. I think that my students spoke a lot more with these new strategies than they were speaking before.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I thought that I heard a lot of student speech speaking in the classroom when I observed the second time. Do you feel like you did a lot of things differently in your instruction?
Absolutely. You know, I was thinking, after you mentioned students doing a turn and talk, I was thinking maybe what would happen if I moved the desks in the classroom. So I did. I moved the desks so that students were always sitting in twos. So I tried to bring this turn and talk into a lot of different parts of my lesson, and it really helped. I also learned from some of the readings that you shared with me that if I put sentence starters and words and phrases on the walls around the students, that maybe when they're stuck and they can't find words, then they can look at the wall and that will help them. And so those two strategies really have already made a big difference in my class.
That's so cool. When I was observing, I noticed students looking up at the words and the sentence frames that you had there for them to use if they did get stuck. And because of that, I heard them using the target language, the vocabulary you were teaching, many times. It was great. Did you learn anything about yourself in the process?
I learned that I need to release control. I think sometimes I am so driven by getting all of the things done that I forget that they need to contribute as well. So yes, I've learned that I need to release some of the control that I have in the class.
Yes, I understand that. I have the same experience in my teaching. Do you feel like you would like to continue working on the same goal to increase oral interaction for students?
Yeah, I don't think that I'm doing this perfectly. I think I'm doing this better, but I'm thinking about one class that I teach where I really need a lot of help in this area. So I'd like to continue this goal, but with another class.
That's great. That's great. Well, you can definitely keep working on it. And I have used some of the ideas you've come up with in my own teaching because of what you've shared with me.
Cool.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. There's such a comfortable and easy tone in that conversation. And we saw a lot of people responding really positively to that. And I think, like you said, Amy, you are, as the coach, you're learning as well at the same time. I had a couple questions, which I think you might have addressed a little bit, but if you wouldn't mind, from Amina and Nadina. How much time should pass between the observation and the post-observation discussion?
That's a great question. Many of the teachers that we work with actually go through one coaching cycle over about 6 months. So there is a fair amount of time between where they're sharing the instructional strategies and thinking of new methods for teaching that are addressing the goal that the teacher set. But it doesn't have to be that long, and it could even be a whole school year. It just depends on your school setting. Some schools are equipped to have students go through this, or teachers go through this much faster. And some schools have schedules that would make it harder to get together and have discussions, for example. And so maybe you would go a little slower.
That makes sense. And what about between, so it sort of depends on the teacher and coach relationship and their timing and things like that. Yeah, Nadina was also asking between the two observations, sort of how much time. It sounds like it could be a week or a couple weeks, or it could be a few months, depending on the schedules of the teachers. So that's another thing I really like about this approach, is it allows for a lot of flexibility, and teachers can really kind of make their own schedule and work with each other to make something that really works for them. So thanks for answering those questions.
Absolutely. And every school is different, as you all know. And so the idea is that you'd be able to use this model in a way that works best for you.
Sounds good.
All right. So moving on to the next slide. And this one is sharing instructional strategies. So now this is a second opportunity to do this. I've already worked with my coach, and my coach has given me some strategies, but now maybe she has, or he has, some more fine-tuned ideas of strategies.
So again, that might look like bringing in additional articles or books, some activities. There are a lot of great lesson plans online that might address the goal that the teacher has identified as wanting to work on. And in Michelle's case, there are plenty of other resources beyond what I shared in the first round of instructional strategies that could also be added. And again, it takes time to do that research. So it's helpful to have this second round of sharing instructional strategies, because it allows more time for the coach to do some additional research. Again, if the discussion leads to new ideas about how to address the goal, then this is a place to kind of maybe think about some new ways to address the goal. Like Michelle said, she had a really large class. So I might actually go look for more information on working with large classes.
Sounds great. And like I said before, when you were we were talking about the post-observation discussion, this is really mutual learning going on, because the coach then might need to do some more research and find some more materials, and in the process find something that might help her instruction as well. And Benish says this brings some freshness to the instruction. Great comment. So yeah, thank you so much.
I forgot to mention that another option, and this doesn't have to happen after the second observation. It can really happen at any part of the coaching cycle, but I might invite Michelle to come in and observe me teaching as a way for me to model some of the techniques that I'm sharing and some of the strategies that I'm sharing with Michelle, if I already do those regularly with my classes.
Great idea. Yeah, I think it's always neat to look at or watch another teacher teach or observe, because sometimes we get so isolated by ourselves doing all the teaching and we don't even know how we're really doing or how someone else might approach it differently. So that's a great idea.
Right.
I have a feeling that you're going to share something like this, but Peggy is asking, could you please send us examples of lesson plans? Do you have examples of anything else you might be going to be sharing with us?
Well, there are a number of websites that have great lesson plans on them for this, and I would recommend Colorín Colorado, which is a great resource, and it has links to all sorts of websites with resources.
Very cool.
And we will share some of the other resources we mentioned at the end of this presentation as well.
Wonderful.
Yes, to come.
Great.
All right, so then moving back into that cycle, it's time to start the coaching cycle again and set instructional goals once again. So when you do this a number of times, the coach gets comfortable with the cycle, the teachers get comfortable with the cycle and kind of know what to anticipate. At this point, the teacher might decide that they really want to continue to work on the same goal, or they might decide that they have a new goal that they want to focus on. This would also be a good time for the coach and the teacher to change roles and move forward in that different direction.
Sounds good.
So we don't want to forget to mention that in the center of the ELM coaching cycle is professional development. And of course, the ELM coaching cycle is professional development in and of itself. In many ways, we think of professional development as an expert comes in and talks to a large group of teachers, and they tell you what they're an expert in, and they give you some ideas, and then you go back to your classroom and decide whether or not it works for you. This coaching model is really based on kind of a different idea of professional development, and it's kind of one-to-one professional development, two teachers working together. But that can also be enhanced or made even better if the school has professional development opportunities related to the same kind of instructional goals. So it's important to remember that professional development is a really important part and component of this cycle.
Wonderful. And we have a great comment from Rashida Bilal, which I think echoes what you're saying here. And she says, both participants in coaching develop professionally. It's mutual learning. So I think that's really true. And Alexander Nunez says, by this point, the teacher may be even more motivated to continue working on other areas. So great comments. And I think we can really see how this is an example of professional development that maybe isn't the first thing that comes to our mind, because sometimes we just think straight to presentation, straight to workshop, something like this. But this is one way to collaboratively work with our colleagues on improving our teaching practice.
Great.
So the next slide is an introduction to the ELM Toolkit for Teacher Professional Development. If you signed in late, ELM stands for English Learners in the Mainstream, and this is kind of our closing gift to you. We are going to be giving you a lot of resources that you can use if you decide to move forward and coach in your schools using these tools. First of all, we have two resources under coaching. The first one is the ELM support tool for English as a foreign language. This is a document that you could bring in to observations and fill out. that you can use to kind of structure the observations that you do with the teachers that you're coaching. Next, we have the norms of collaboration. And the norms of collaboration are a good idea for setting the type of language that you will use in conversation. Next, the next category is academic language. We have a document called Building Academic Language Objectives for English as a Foreign Language. This is a step-by-step walkthrough about how to write an academic language objective. And that has an accompanying video lecture of academic language for English as a foreign language. So you can use the document as a roadmap, and you can use the lecture to walk you through it. In the third category, we have the action plan. So the action plan is what you would use at the early onset. If I'm trying to decide who I want to coach, when I want to coach them, I would think about these things when I'm developing my action plan. I might even want my school administrator to know that I'm doing this or to approve of me doing this. And so that would be a time to bring him or her into the discussion. We have two action plans for you. The first one is filled with descriptions telling you exactly what to do. And the second one is blank. It's a template. You could use that to fill out for your own school. Finally, we have a database of resources for professional development, and this is on our ELM project website. And these are a variety of articles, videos, strategies that you can use that are organized around different themes that might be of interest to the people that you work with.
Wonderful. Sounds like an amazing resource for our teachers with lots of tools and ideas and templates for using this model, this coaching model in their context. And we are sharing the link where all of those resources can be accessed on our American English webinar Ning. So please feel free to take a look at that and find all of these resources that Michelle and Amy are sharing with us here. I do have one question, which was from, let's see, Faisal Ansari. And they're asking, do you have rubrics, or should we, can we set rubrics for coaching? What would you recommend?
So we are very clear in our model that this is not evaluative, right? So we know that sometimes a school administrator will come into a classroom and do an observation to evaluate the teacher in the room. And that is not the spirit of the ELM project. That we want this to be an ongoing conversation between colleagues, right? Mm-hmm. A friendly conversation between colleagues. That being said, our support tool, the first tool in that first folder, can be used as kind of check marks. So you might check off an area and say, you know, Kate, I saw you doing this, but I didn't see you doing that. So the next time I come back, I want you to be focusing on this other area. So as far as, you know, using it as a rubric to evaluate a teacher, I would say that that's not in the spirit of the cycle. However, if you're using it as a rubric to then come back and show growth, you can certainly do that with the ELM support tool.
And if you did decide to develop a rubric on your own for the coaching, it would probably be helpful to develop that rubric with the teacher that you're coaching, so that the teacher is kind of setting the goals for what that would look like. Because the research tells us that if the teacher sets the goal for him or herself and helps to decide what is going to be observed, then they're more likely to change teaching and to try new things.
Great.
All right.
Oh, I have a couple of quick questions for you from our audience, if that's okay.
Sure.
Let's see. Aisha Adele says, how do you involve the school management with this process? Do you have any ideas for her?
Well, if you take a look at the action plan document, you'll see that at the very end, we ask for a signature. I think it's really important, a signature from the school administration. I think it's really important that the school administration knows that it's going on and is supportive of this kind of coaching. But it also needs to be made clear that this is not part of a teacher evaluation. So this would be a conversation to have before you even get started, to start to write your action plan, which is simple, by the way, 1 or 2 pages. It's your plan. Bring it to your administrator and have a conversation about whether or not your administrator thinks it will work in your setting.
And the other piece is that the administrator can usually help to make sure that you have time in your schedule to do some of the coaching. So having the administrator involved in that way can be really useful. And we have seen administrators who like the coaching model and want all teachers to do it, not just the language teachers, but all of the teachers.
Great. Yeah, and we had a couple folks asking again about the evaluation piece, and just wanted to quickly share again that this is definitely not a plan for evaluation. And if you did want to have your administrators buy into this coaching model, or to know that it's going on and to be very supportive of it, you could let them know that this is really a teacher-to-teacher collaboration, trying to help teachers be helpful to each other, and that it's separate from whatever evaluation tools might be in place by the administration. So this is in addition to that, it's just a way for teachers to think of goals and work to achieve them, which I think is really exciting and empowering, because all of you, our webinar and Facebook Live audience, are teacher leaders and can be teacher leaders. And this is one way, just by having a one-on-one relationship with another teacher and sharing your ideas, or having them share their ideas with you, is a great way to build your skills in teaching English. So, all right.
Great. Well, let's wrap up now and think about some of the key takeaways or points from the ELM coaching cycle. So we want you to know that coaching can work in a variety of school settings. So I'm sure the audience, we have people who teach in so many different schools, so many different types of environments where you have more students, you might have fewer students. And the idea is that the coaching can work in just about any school setting. And of course, we're very curious how you think it might work where you teach.
So the next one is that teachers interested in coaching can take turns being the coach. So this is not a hierarchical model where some people are on the top evaluating people on the bottom. This is a new way for teachers to engage in professional development with each other.
Definitely. And we also should emphasize that the ELM coaching model is a great cycle to follow, but there may be pieces of it that you don't have to use. The second sharing out of instructional strategies might not be necessary. So you can decide how it fits best with your particular school setting and decide what pieces of it make the most sense where you are. The key idea, of course, is that there's an opportunity for teachers to be sharing their expertise with each other, because the teachers know best how to teach, of course, and you have so much knowledge to share with each other. And like Kate said, it's easy to just be in our classroom and forget what's happening in other classrooms. And this is a way to make sure that you're really sharing what you know how to do well.
Wonderful. Yes, definitely. Teachers, be inspired to use this model and to adapt it for your context so that it works well and helps you and your colleagues to develop as teachers. Great.
So finally, we just want to thank you at American English for Educators for hosting us today. Thank you to all of the listeners for joining us and contributing in really meaningful ways. And please stay in touch with us. You can check out our work at the website listed here. You can contact us at the ELM Project at Hamlin University. We would love to hear about your experiences with coaching if you decide to use this model or otherwise. And we would also love to answer any questions that you might have. So thank you.
Wonderful. We have so many great comments that I'm just going to say a few before we close. The U.S. Embassy in Cuba says, Cuban teachers appreciate the ELM Toolkit. Thanks for sharing. Let's see. Ana Ferreira says that this is not necessarily a practice in her country, but she thinks it might make a big difference, especially if teachers are losing their motivation. Daniel says that it's a very wonderful or useful information. Noreen, a wonderful webinar, love the discussion. And Imelda says, great ideas to get better as teachers. So once again, just want to say thank you so much, Michelle and Amy, for your engaging session on how to plan for and implement the ELM toolkit. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank
It was
you.
a great opportunity.
And of course, as always,